And so yet another installment into the hidden history of the African American fighting man. Got a question for you. During the Civil War, could enslaved Americans be drafted?
No.
Short answer is yes. Yes, they could. And they were, in fact, drafted. I didn't realize this, but I checked with the War Department, and this is a pretty significant thing for those of you who get hung up on just enslavement. Let me tell you, those who were enslaved were, in fact, drafted, to say the least. By May of 1864, the question had arose in the Enrollment Act. You see, up until that time, there was a draft of Americans between the ages of 20 and 45. You heard me right, 20 and 45. By this time, of course, you had the Emancipation Proclamation, which Lincoln called for induction of African Americans into the United States military for obvious reasons. Well, for the same reason that Negroes have fought for this country, and that is they needed them, or else risk losing the war, going back to the Revolutionary War. So here is what they came up with. An enslaved American, and by the way, that's the way you say it. There were no slaves in America by this time. They were enslaved. Make that very clear. Enslaved Americans of loyal masters in any of the loyal states. Now, you got to understand, ladies and gentlemen, you could still have enslavement even after the Emancipation Proclamation if you were a state loyal to the government. You see, those Negroes were only freed in those states in rebellion. Got me? However, the United States military was in need of people, and so those who were enslaved to masters loyal to the Union, having been drafted in the United States Air Forces, was to be made free prior to entering the service. In other words, they had a list, according to the 1860 census, of all the Negroes, even on plantations, who were between the ages of 20 and 45. So while they're on the plantations, working for massa, they were called up in those states that were still loyal. And when they were called up, they were then immediately deemed free. However, upon being drafted, every master got $100 for that enslaved American. Well done. So here it is, the buck, as he would call him, is enslaved, and so he was drafted, and all of a sudden, I get $100. Became good business, Ro. For the master, I mean. When the enslaved volunteered, so you see there was a draft? But needless to say, once the brothers on the plantation found out that they could be freed by joining the military, let me just tell you, they were bailing off that plantation, Ro, in and around Prince George's County particularly. When the enslaved volunteers, as opposed to being drafted, he was entitled to his freedom, and his master was compensated $300. You like this, don't you? So now what do you think the master was doing? Waiting until he's drafted, or saying, hey, boy, you... Now, one would think that, but you got to understand, for anyone who would enslave someone, it was an economic decision. And he could have very well have paid $500-600 for the African-American enslaved. So what the masters would do, they would encourage those individuals who were closer to 45 to join.
Who's going to reimburse me my $500?
That's what I'm talking about. However, those who were older, they felt they could not get enough work out of, right? So they encouraged them for $300 to get this is real stuff. This is coming from the War Department. So those who were masters and had enslaved encouraged some of their enslaved Americans to join. Well, no one could lawfully prevent the drafted enslaved from entering the military service of the United States by procuring some kind of substitute payment plan. In other words, say, look, I want to keep him. He my best guy out there in the field. I want to keep him. Now, can I pay for him? No. Lincoln didn't tolerate that. When you were drafted, you were drafted. If he chose to volunteer, then you got your $300 as payment for him, and he was henceforth and forevermore free. Now, if the drafted enslaved preferred to avoid the military and to remain enslaved, oh, you love this, it was his personal privilege to secure a qualified exemption from that draft by the payment of $300. Now, the master couldn't pay it for it, but if he's enslaved and he didn't want to go, then the enslaved could raise $300 and pay it to the United States government, and then he didn't have to go into the Civil War and kill masters. How many do you think did that? The War Department reported no African American enslaved opted to pay for draft deferment. They couldn't wait. They couldn't wait. I'm reading it. They couldn't wait to join the United States military and be free, especially when it came down to killing those who were enslaved. Didn't know it. Now you know it. Just check with the War Department, United States government, as it applies to drafting enslaved Americans in this country. All right, where do I start? I think I'll start at the top, folks. Now listen to me closely. You just had a terrorist attack in Sutherland, Texas. We all know the motive. We know the MO. We really do. We've seen it before. Of course, needless to say, it's been called, a mass murder. It's been called by a deranged guy. So let's just do the test roll.
All right.
All right, so did he holler Allahu Akbar?
No, sir. No reports as to him hollering out Allahu Akbar, which means God is the greatest in Arabic.
Did he wear a turban?
He did not wear a turban. He said to be dressed in all black with some sort of tactical gear on, possibly a helmet, but no turban.
No turban. Did he have the pointed shoes turned up on the end with the little bells on? Did it seem like he was of foreign descent?
No genie shoes, no, sir.
No genie shoes.
He recently shaved his beard, which made him look even less like a foreigner.
Oh, he had a beard. That's
He had a
something.
beard.
He had a beard.
Shaved it, though, recently.
Dreadlocks?
No dreadlocks. Greasy crop cut here.
Greasy crop? Freckles?
Possibly freckles. Freckles not yet confirmed.
Gray eyes? Blue eyes? Green eyes?
Bluish green.
Oh, okay. No. Caucasian?
Caucasian.
Well, we know one thing for sure. It's not a terrorist attack.
Can't possibly be a terrorist attack. This
No.
is a deranged individual.
Folks, let me just tell you this, because I have so much. What does it matter? First, I'm going to tell you what it matters, why it matters, that we call this what it is. And then I'm going to tell you, the MO, that there is some. Look, folks, I've already done this before. I mean, going back to 9/11. This is a male thing, typically. First and foremost, most of the terrorist attacks are done by males. Most of those males have been adversely, by one way or another, rejected by some female. Quirky, odd, strange, unusual, queer, all of the above. Not comfortable with his own masculinity. He's got to define something outside himself. In other words, it's not a matter of what's behind his fly in his pants. It's got to be something else, some big gun, big truck, whatever. He's got to show some sense of power. Look, I don't have to be a psychiatrist to see this. I'm just linking up every one of these attacks, be it in this country or other countries. These are not soldiers of fortune, soldiers of war. These are individuals who are not comfortable. There's been one female who I would add to that, who was stopped from joining ISIS. I'll get to her in a minute. But they have this sense of wanting to prove to the rest of the world that they're bravado. They want to prove that they are in fact capable of being men. In many cases, they were rejected by the law enforcement, the U.S. military, on the playground, weren't good in sports, girls beat them up. You know what I mean? They they just were not too good at things that they thought they should be good at. And sometimes they're good at some things, and they just didn't think that was important because it didn't attract the attention of someone, particularly someone that they were smitten by. You rejected me. Every one of these. Just go back to all of them. I mean, from Orlando to San Bernardino to the Midwest. Look, any of them. New York, the Bummer on New York City, Times Square. All of these guys. Eric Rudolph, Kaczynski, every one of Timothy McVeigh. Every one of these have fit this MO. Am I wrong, Ro?
You're right.
I went through and did a checklist on each one of these, and all of this. Oh yeah, well, it's got to be Muslim, it's got to be brown, That's just bull. The common link of every one of these men is that they were losers. They were weak, and they wanted to take it out on the rest of the world. I'll show you. It's always the motive of revenge. These are not individuals, ladies and gentlemen, who are the underground like you'd find with Jewish during the Berlin conflict, or the Minutemen of Lexington and Concord. This is not the subversive rebellion, the underground of the French in World War I, fighting against the enemy, using any method necessary, or the Palestinians fighting against the Israelis. Using any means necessary. A combatant. No, these are individuals who are hell-bent on going out in a blaze of glory eventually and teaching the world a lesson, thinking that somehow or another they're going to wake up in,
Valhalla.
Valhalla! He gets sprayed in the mouth with the chrome paint and go out. Blazing. That's what you have here. That's what a terrorist is. You guys in law enforcement need to start saying it, and you need to start acting like that, and then you will, in fact, head off this. The first idea here is that there's no, let's see, ISIS inspired. And only ISIS can inspire. It can't be it can't be neo-Confederate white supremacy inspiring. It's got to be simply ISIS, which is really so stupid to me. Not nearly as stupid, ladies and gentlemen, as the assumption that somehow or another having more guns is going to protect us. That's just stupid. I'm a gun owner many times over. It's just stupid. And I'm an advocate for it, actually. So let's start into this. I've defined this guy. He henceforth and forevermore will be known to Rip Daniels as Sutherland Springs. I'm not even going to call this name the first time. I don't care. Sutherland Springs terrorist. How about that, bro? Does that sound? We've got a church terrorist. It needs to be something better than that. Something that is more degrading.
Yeah.
Because he killed children. 5 children in one family. The youngest is 5 years old. A woman who was pregnant. The baby terrorist? No. What do you think about it? Need to come up with it.
All right.
Here's what you don't know or don't want to admit, America. This guy dressed like he was, tactically, with a Ruger, AR. By the way, AR doesn't stand for assault rifle. Some of you think that it does. It does not. What does it stand for, bro? Testing.
Armalite rifle.
Yeah, Armalite. Very good. Just want to make sure you understand that. He's got a Ruger. Up until 1994, I think, this was considered it was outlawed. This was considered as an assault rifle, which it is, ladies and gentlemen. It is a personnel tool. It is an anti-personnel tool.
Meaning it's constructed and it's developed to kill people.
That's correct. That's what this is. And you need to call it that. Now, this guy, up until this guy started firing his weapon in Texas, he had done nothing wrong. One can argue. He had, in fact, bought a firearm. Now, there's questions as to how he did that. I'll get to that in a minute. But law enforcement, listen to me closely. This guy walking down the street in front of a church, even with body armor on, with He could have, I don't know whether he had something else. I'm sure he probably had a Beretta or something like that, a Glock, whatever. He had several weapons and reloads, right? This guy could have stood out in front of that church all day, and law enforcement could not have stopped him. At a time of his choosing, in this great country, in Texas specifically, he had the right to do that. Free to do that. Let's see the hands of those who think that that's a right you want to protect. All right? Okay? If that is a right you want to protect, sir, ma'am, get ready for more of this. You know what insults me? What insults me as a gun owner is this lunacy that has taken over our country for the sake of the NRA or whoever. This lunacy. You realize, ladies and gentlemen, when we came up with all these gun rights, gun laws change in the state of Mississippi, open carry and all, you realize that gun deaths were down and going down? They peaked somewhere in the late 1970s, early mid-1980s. And because of Clinton, I do mean Clinton, putting 100,000 more policemen on the street and coming up with things like grants for law enforcement, where they had the drug thing in the high schools, the Explorer projects, all of that. It was working. Yeah, I need to say they stopped that somewhere around George W. Bush. Actually, toward the end of the Clinton administration, it began to wane. Let's put it that way. But this guy he could have stood in front of a bank that way, or a casino. Or he could have stood in front of a nursery school, armed to the hilt. Now, ladies and gentlemen, it is stupid for him and it's pathetic for us to think that somehow or another that's a good idea. For law enforcement, you guys are the most pathetic by allowing this, by not contacting your legislators and saying, look, this is absurd. We can't defend this. One guy with an AR-15 with a pump stock or slide stock that causes it to become literally an automatic weapon. One guy could have held out the entire sheriff's department in that county. One guy. This was terrorism no less than the terrorism in Vegas. The motive revenge. To send that social commentary that says, I hate all y'all. In this case, there's been some connection. His in-laws were supposedly members of the church. His estranged wife, by the way, he was arrested by the military for abusing an 11-month-old and served some time in the stockade for it and became honorably discharged, which is why he shouldn't have even been able to get a firearm. Dishonorably. Yeah, did I say honorably? I'm sorry. Dishonorably discharged. Yeah, and then when you get that, then you can't buy a firearm. Well, he did. Fell through the cracks, you say? You know what gets me about some of you guys who are staunch NRA? How is it that they're supposed to keep, meaning the federal government, supposed to keep no records of when we buy a firearm, but yet they can go back and find out when we bought a firearm? I mean, you realize how ludicrous that is? Oh, yeah, I don't want the government to get my... They shouldn't keep a national registry. That's just silly. It's just dumb for us to even think that, first and foremost. But even dumber for us to think that a guy, when they are any kind of assault rifle, or any semi-automatic as far as I'm concerned, that is this guy standing in front of anywhere where you have people with an anti-personnel weapon is a good idea. Oh, I feel safe. I had to tell the chief the other day, I don't even trust him with a firearm. Particularly when it's aimed at me.
Well,
that doesn't, look, that's no insult. It is just, that is common sense.
I would say that's common sense.
That's common sense now. Doesn't mean I dislike anybody.
Not about that.
It's not about that. It's about gun safety for me. When that muzzle is turned toward you, you should be very, very unsafe or feel that way. And your first order of business is to alleviate that. When you hoist your weapon toward someone, the intent is simple. It is to kill them. There ain't no play like Melee. It's not even a warning. Because that person sees that and realizes that. But back to this guy. So he had a Ruger, AR, all of that. Facebook post suggested that he possibly was an atheist. Supposedly he said that he was a Sunday school teacher. Classmates thought he was a little bit odd, strange, unusual, queer, crazy.
Sunday school terrorist.
Yeah, Sunday school terrorist. I like that. Okay. Henceforth and forevermore. He'll be known as a Sunday school terrorist. Very good. Thank you, bro. Appreciate that. He was, here it is here. He received a bad conduct discharge and confinement to 12 months and a reduction in grade. He, let's see, legally purchased a firearm. We don't know the conditions. This is what it says here, that typically when you're dishonorably discharged, you're not supposed to be able to purchase a firearm. However, we have yet, the ATF have yet to release the conditions of his dishonorable discharge. Maybe there are some exemptions. I don't know. However, the federal law prohibits a person who's been dishonorably discharged from buying a firearm. And then there's the domestic conviction. Even that should have precluded him from buying one.
And the governor even went so far as to say that he was denied by Texas a permit, but of course that would not preclude him from still obtaining a firearm at like a gun show or a swap meet type situation.
So here he is, 11:20 a.m. by the time church starts in many churches, like First Missionary. That's the later church. The earlier church starts before then. Here he is standing out there in full gear, dressed on in all black. That's that bravado thing. Sort of like, ISIS had the same uniform. Oh, you didn't know that? Oh yeah, you see. Yeah, well, that's the little parachute, the MC Hammer pants, and all that, the boots.
What you're trying to imply.
Well, I mean, all he has to do is have a Muslim name, and then you'll know, wouldn't you?
So you're saying if he still had his beard yesterday, then...
He doesn't have to have one. He just got the dress. That's the uniform of everybody who's connected with ISIS, So he started firing at the church from the outside. He moved to the right side of the church and continued to fire. Then he went into the church firing. Now, what that tells me right off the bat is that he had elongated clips. With a number of dead, 26, 20 wounded, and he started on the outside coming in, he could very well have had a slide pump. He really could have. Ruger's infamous for getting jammed. I mean, of course, he may have trained with it. I don't doubt that he did. That's going to come out. But it sounds to me like he was pouring a whole lot of lead in and around. Keeping in mind, in close confinements, one bullet can kill several people, or at least injure several people. I don't doubt in that very small church. There was a Harley Davidson in the church. Did you see that? I saw some pictures of a Harley Davidson there.
The only church, the only motorcycle worthy enough to be in the sanctuary, Harley Davidson.
That's like a cool church. So he moved to the right, then started firing his way inside, and had probably a Kevlar vest or something like that.
At least 40 people hit, 26 now confirmed dead, 20 others wounded.
So then he hightails it, gets out of there, goes into his car, and hightails it out about 10 miles out of town, and by which a passerby comes along, and one of the church members jumps into his truck, and starts out after him
with their shotgun. Yeah. This is Texas.
So the other guy didn't have an AR?
Well, no. That was the initial reports. That the other guy also had an AR. Conflicting reports have come out. The most recent information is that he had a shotgun. And still no word on whether or not it was his shots or the terrorist's own weapon that ended his life.
Yeah, in a situation like that, I would prefer a Morrisburg shotgun, some kind of pump that could put a lot of lead in the air in hopes of double alts, in hopes that maybe one would hit. I mean, let me just tell you this, man. Don't ask me how I know this. I know this. How do I say this? Well, for many of my audience, let's just say some of you guys who have been out on the paintball, play paintball, and I don't do that. I've never done it, but I could imagine that it was fun. I just never had time to do it. I'd love to do it. But I understand they have some automatic paintball kinds of rifles, pistols, and so forth.
Yes.
Now, let me just tell you this. And don't ask me how I know it, because I'm not going to tell you. But typically what happens when you have an individual with an automatic, he's able to pin you down. You're not able to get a shot off, per se, without being hit. And this is in real life. What I like about a shotgun, and if you had a shotgun formed paintball, then it would put more lead in the air, and so consequently there's a greater possibility of hitting the person with the automatic or semi-automatic weapon. You see, what you do is a series of shots in an equal line. You got me? It's the whole idea of putting more lead in. And if by chance he's hit with any one of those pellets, in this case paintballs, little tiny paintballs, then it leaves you an opening. You got me? And look, I could tell you tactically, it works. Don't ask me how I know. I will say this guy with the shotgun, however, probably giving chase. If in fact the Sunday school terrorist was not prepared for that, and many are not. Many are not prepared to be shot back at. They're just not. It's like, okay, what do I do now? They planned the little caper of surprise attack and killing a bunch of unarmed people, women and children. They got that figured out.
In this scenario, there are no shots coming.
Oh, they've already figured that they can get in and out because there's nothing there, and there's
Soft target.
soft target. However, if in fact they even knew that there was, let's say if there was an armed guard in the front, he'd be the first to fall. A lot of people, they want to have a guard. Okay, you see the guard? First person you kill when you want to do anything is the person with the gun. I mean, if you are a criminal and you're intent on going in and doing something like, let's just say, robbing a bank or an armored car, you do realize having a gun does not make you immune from attack. Just look at the history of it, for God's sake. What's stupid about this, America, is that you're being convinced by the idiots who are low self-esteem, cowardly wusses that we've got to have semi-automatic weapons available on every corner. And then there's the president. Here he is sitting in Japan. Here, I want you to pull up what the president said about this very horrible shooting. Pull it up.
I think that mental health is the problem here. This was a very, based on preliminary reports, very deranged individual.
Deranged.
A lot of problems.
Not a terrorist.
We have a lot of mental health problems in our country, as do other countries. But this isn't a guns situation. I mean, we could go into it, but it's a little bit soon to go into it. But fortunately, somebody else had a gun that was shooting in the opposite direction. Otherwise, it would have been as bad as it was. It would have been much worse.
Yeah, right.
But this is a mental...
All right, stop. As if somehow or another, if he did not have a gun, this would have happened anyway. That's just stupid. Let me tell you how stupid it is. He's sitting there in Japan. Saying this, and the Japanese are sitting there listening to our president say some words like this. And do you know what the gun laws are in Japan? First, let me tell you this. Do you know what the gun deaths are in Japan? Gun deaths. Let's see. I want to get it right. I want to get the... here we go. It's in Japan. Tokyo. The number of gun deaths in Japan totaled 6 in 2014, compared with 33,599 in the United States. I said gun deaths. 6. However, do you know why that is, America? I can tell you why. See, if you want to buy a gun in Japan, you need patience and a whole lot of determination. You have to attend an all-day class, take a written exam, and pass a shooting range test with a mark of at least 95. You can't buy a handgun in Japan. Only shotguns and air rifles are allowed. There are also mental health and drug tests you've got to go through. I said tests. Your criminal record is checked, and police look for links to extremist groups. Then they check your relatives too. That's right. And even your work colleagues. And as well, having the power to deny the gun license, police also have sweeping powers to search and seize the weapons. Do I feel somehow or another because of I have weapons defenseless? No. I'm not for gun roundups. Oh, by no means. I'm not. I too think that the ownership of some guns should be outlawed, or devices like slide pump or pump stock. The law restricts the number of gun shops. In most Japan's 40 or so, shops, there can be, I want to go to, okay, here's one. Police must be notified where the gun and the ammunition are stored in your home. And they must be stored separately under lock and key. Police will also inspect guns once a year, and after 3 years, your license runs out, at which point You have to attend a course and pass the test again. Does it bother you? It doesn't bother me. I'll tell you why, because there's no doubt Japanese have clandestine weapons. They are. They're going to tell everything. What this does is it says that if by chance police see someone, like, let's just say, the Sunday school terrorist, in broad daylight, walking around with an assault rifle, he got to be dealt with. As he should, by the way. His rights does not supersede the rights of others. Japanese police officers rarely use their weapons. Only 6 shots were fired by Japanese police nationwide in 2015. Now, if you say to me that gun control doesn't work, then I'm going to say to you, prove it. Right now, in the local Coliseum here in Biloxi, they've just put up metal detectors. Why? I tell you what. Especially for firearms. You can't go into the Superdome without metal detectors. How many shots have been fired in there lately? Now, folks, I'm not talking about the abandonment of all guns and the getting rid of the Second Amendment. It doesn't take that. It just takes some common sense here. And you guys in law enforcement need to lead the way in this, because you're going to be outmanned and outgunned very, very soon. Trust me on this. Now, once John Q. Public stopped being wiped out nearly as much as you guys, Dallas should have taught you that. One man, what did he kill? Six officers on the streets of Dallas?
Yeah.
One man. And held the officers at bay until they had to blow him up. Think about it. Yeah, we'll be back.
Hi, everybody. Healthcare.gov is open